We film these live on Facebook. We are episode number 59 today. We've had Gil on a couple times. Actually, Gil is one of the most successful interviews we've had, and if there's anybody that's always in first or second place right there along with Gil is Mr. Craig Studnicky. How many of you know Craig?
Gil always wins, though. He always wins.
He's got the nicest toys. I want to thank Sebastian and Gil for having us, and thank you guys for coming out. We know it's windy and it's hot, so we're going to try to give you as much information as short as possible so you get more drinks and we can enjoy our night. Cool? All right. We're lucky to have Craig because I barely see him. I run a company called RelatedISG International Realty. It's a general real estate brokerage, half owned by ISG. The other half is owned the Related.
The win. And part of mine is owned by you.
Yeah. Soon to be. So what happens is, and we're going to try it this way, Craig is always on the road presenting the Miami Report. Craig, the Miami Report itself came out in
2009.
2009, but the latest came out at the end of April. It's been 2 months.
2 months.
What presentation is this?
Oh, you mean since?
Yeah.
Well, the big one was May 29th at Brickell City Center. I don't know if any of you had a chance to go. That was big. Thanks. That was.
How many of you went out at the end of April, went to the to Brickell City Center for that presentation? There was about 1,500 people there. All right, cool.
Including Jackie Molina. She was the star of that show. That was pretty interesting because I think that's an indication of how much people really enjoy this.
Yeah.
There were 900 people that showed up and 745 people on Facebook Live. That was a lot. But since then, I guess I've done probably 20 to 25 different presentations for different real estate companies. I get either invited to go there or I try to get them to Brickell City Center, which is my current listing. But I'll go anywhere because I think this information helps us all kind of sell Miami more or less the same way. At least I hope so.
So if there's any brokers out there that want Craig to speak, make sure you hit Craig up after this, give him your card, get him out there because there's no better public speaker than Craig. Now, Craig,
just no coffee because I have a hard time with Miami in June.
Yeah, I think we all are right now. Now, for those of you that have seen the Closer Club, I always open up asking the guests backstory, what's their history, but really the star of today's show is going to be the Miami Report.
Yeah.
And you have the fortunate luck to present the Miami Report because you are the author along with Veronica Gorson over here. So tell us a little bit about why the Miami Report even came about.
Okay, well, it came about, and those of you that maybe heard my presentation before, forgive me if I'm being a little repetitive, but it came from the cliche, necessity is the mother of invention. It was 2009, 1 year after 2008, that I know you know, but if you weren't in real estate in 2008, you didn't know what some of us veterans of real estate were going through. It was a disaster, not just for real estate, but the worldwide economy. It affected condos in Miami. It affected everything. General Motors and Ford almost went out of business. Lehman Brothers did go out of business. It was a mess. And by 2009, I think the dust had settled after that nuclear bomb went off. And we all went out and we tried to figure out how bad it really was out there. The New York Times and CNN decided to really pick on Miami in a notorious way. They wrote articles that said Miami was probably the king of defaulted condos as a result of 2008 and all that over-speculation. And they basically said we had about 10 years of standing inventory. Well, I've been selling real estate for now 4 decades. I've had a couple of wonderful mentors in my life. And what I've learned along the way is that we never can sell anything without a sense of urgency, and that I know you know. And the easiest way I've learned to create a sense of urgency without having to be rather obvious about it is to create a sense of scarcity. So my partner, Veronica Gorson, if she wants that 3-bedroom apartment on the 30th floor with that wraparound balcony, Veronica, that's the only one we have left in this building. If that's a sense of scarcity, and that automatically creates urgency. But how in God's name could I do that against the headlines from CNN and New York Times, because ISG is just not that important. So Veronica, myself, and a few other smart folks in ISG, we just said to ourselves, this can't be right. We live here. It just doesn't make any sense. So sometimes common sense, what's the old expression? There's nothing more uncommon than common sense, but we try to apply it the little bit that we had. And we literally went out, neighborhood by neighborhood, building by building, to determine exactly how many defaulted condos there were for sale. The New York Times and CNN said 22,000. And we came, I'll never forget the number, 11,502. And trust me, we double checked it, triple checked it, quadruple checked it. That's it. Now, that's still a lot of inventory. So we said, we think the New York Times is wrong. We think it's 5 years of inventory, not 10. And I think the most fun Veronica and I had was the 2010 Miami report.
Okay. Why?
Because we were wrong. It wasn't 5 years it wasn't a 5-year supply. It was half of that inventory in 1 year was gone. And the momentum was there. The urgency to buy was there. The prices were low, that I know. But all of us that were selling real estate back then, you remember there was no mortgage money, not just in Miami, there was no mortgage money in the United States because prices were, we call that the falling knife environment. No one wants to catch a falling knife. Prices were dropping. You couldn't get an appraiser to give you a fair appraisal, so therefore you couldn't get a mortgage unless you went to a hard money lender, and that's not a lot of fun. So without mortgage money, all of this real estate was selling. And now I know it was selling to South Americans. I know the Brazilian economy was very strong. The dollar was weak. And yeah, that's how we did it. Argentina bought, Brazil bought, Venezuela was alive and well back then. By the next year, it was all gone. And that's what created the next cycle. But, and I think you all probably will agree with me, the popularity of Miami, it wasn't just the low prices. It's the attractiveness of Miami around the world that made all that real estate disappear in 2 years. And I personally made myself a promise. I'm never going to second guess the popularity or the resiliency of the Miami real estate market ever again, because I saw it, I went through it. Veronica and I kind of, like all of us, we sort of suffered through it because we didn't know when the end would be the end and we could actually start the next cycle. So anyway, that's how we started, and that's what happened.
You know, we're talking a lot about 2008, 2009, 2007, the end of 2007. How many of you were in business in 2007, 2008? A lot of awesome experienced group.
Yeah.
All right, so you talked about being wrong on 2010.
Yeah.
So, and this happens to be the 10th version of the Miami report. Started 2009, we're in 2019. How else, or how accurate, aside from 2010, have you guys been on your projections in the Miami report?
Since 2010, we've been really good, really good. Now, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way. Along the way, you know, now you and I are partners in a company called RelatedISG. I have been blessed to handle all of Property Markets Group, PMG's work since they came to Miami. I now handle a lot of Swire's work. There are developers that I don't necessarily handle and represent as an exclusive broker, including Gil Deser. But there are the Gil Desers of the world, and there's the David Martins of the world from Terra. They give us their sales reports because this thing has become kind of, it's probably the most accurate reflection of what is really selling and what's really available for sale in the market, not because we guess anymore. In 2009, we were doing a lot of guessing. Now we get their sales reports. So what we're giving you is the summary of what they have actually sold. So when ISG or Related ISG shows you this, and in here we show you what the state of the market was, in this particular case as of April of this year, it's spot on. And we simply follow the absorptions of, say, the last 12 months, because that's usually a really good predictor of the next 12 months.
Now, what I love about you is we could totally go off script, so I want to go off script for a second. There's a lot of companies that put out reports like the Miami report. This is the only one that does not have any type of advertising. And this has definitely been a kitchen sink argument in the ISG boardroom about putting advertising this or not. Why do you consistently insist that there's no advertising in reporting?
Because Veronica and I do not want you brokers or your clients or developers or bankers or architects or other developers around the world that read this and rely on it to see it colored by any commercial advertising whatsoever. As it is, we're real estate brokers in South Miami. So I guess you could argue that we're coloring the roses red a little bit anyway because we're selling real estate. But once I start putting ads in here of my properties, we just believe that it will lose some of its credibility. And so we know this is all on our nickel. And we stay true to that credo each and every year. It's expensive to put out, very expensive to put out.
So now I got to ask the crowd: do you guys agree with Craig that by not having any advertising in it?
There we go. Thank you
All right,
very much.
Craig.
Okay.
So, proof of concept.
We're not going to be selling advertising tonight, so aren't you happy?
Now, this came out pretty much 2 months to the day.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming there's a lot of people in this crowd and a lot of their buyers thinking that a lot has not changed in the last 2 months since we went to print. So there are 3 questions that I want to talk about what has changed. And I know you're taking out your clip notes because these are some impressive numbers. What has changed from when this went to print 2 months ago to today? And we'll start off, there's 3 categories. Let's start off with the unsold developer inventory.
Okay, well, let me start with this, if I may answer that question.
Please.
So we called this particular issue supply shock. Now, if you don't have your hands on one of these, you can go to any one of our real estate offices. In fact, Muse down the street, there's boxes and boxes and boxes of this that you can take with you. Also on ISGworld.com, we have this available for you as well. We called it supply shock, and we published some numbers. The first one is 2101. At the time of the printing, 2101, remember when we started this? So CNN said there were 22,000 unsold condos between Coconut Grove and Fort Lauderdale. This particular issue, we're telling you there's only 2,101 developer unsold units, which includes every classification of developer inventory, meaning standing inventory, properties that are under construction like Casa Armani, standing inventory, if I may, like Muse, and properties that are in pre-construction, like Una, for example, down the Brickell area. You put all of that developer inventory together, and it totals 2,101 as of April 30th. Do we live in a stagnant market? No. Miami's Miami. Remember, back in 2009, even with 11,500 units for sale, in 2 years it was all gone. People are always buying Miami. So to answer your question, that it's not 2101 anymore. It's now 1,988, which means in the last 2 months, despite some of your clients saying, I'm going to wait because I hear there's a lot of inventory for sale, and if I wait, I'll probably get a better price. Okay, wait. But while you're waiting, slowly but surely, onesies and twosies from Coconut Grove to Fort Lauderdale, onesies and twosies being sales, they're selling. At Brickell City Center, Alex, I hear that all the time. And I tell the clients, no problem. If you come back in 6 months, say I'll see her out at Art Basel, you might be right. I still may be offering the same incentives that particular developer Swire is offering right now. But you're not going to have this view. Because most condo buildings, high-rises, sell from the top down. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And we'll get in, hopefully, in a bit, as to how did we sell 100 units from Coconut Grove to Fort Lauderdale in the last 60 days, which, by the way, for Miami is really not that much selling, but nevertheless, that's what happened.
And at Brickell City Center, how many sales you go through this month already in Brickell City Center?
This was a good one. We've done 8. I know that sounds like a big number, but we've worked hard at it. And yeah, we've done 8, but Spire's offered some unique incentives and so.
We got 3 days left.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the resale inventory. We're general real estate agents. We can sell anything that takes a real estate license to sell. What about the resale market?
You know, in previous reports, we never really dived that deeply into the MLS resale market. We usually just focused on developer inventory. But now, you and I have RelatedISG, and I get bombarded with questions about that. A long time ago, I learned that the following, it's kind of a golden nugget. You've probably heard me say this before, but I promise you can take this to the bank. When 5% or less of any particular condo building, a single-family home development, is on the market for sale, that's what we would call a seller's market. There's not that much to choose from, and the sellers have the edge. When 10% or more are on the market, that's a buyer's market. There's a lot to choose from, and the buyers or the sellers are in competition with one another. When it comes to single-family homes in South, and now that you and I have this resale business, I thought, okay, well, let's dive into this, because I think we're making a good point that there's not that much developer inventory for sale. What's really scary, and part of the reason we call it supply shock, is there's nothing in the pipeline that's going to replace.
Save that.
Okay. Save that. All right. So, let me back up then. The MLS market, the resale market, is usually the canary in the coal mine. It's the barometer. It's a good indicator of where development inventory is probably going to go. When there is a lot of inventory in MLS, developers slow down because there's just too much out there. When MLS inventory starts to get a little bit low, developers pay attention to that and they bust a move. What we have noticed when it comes to single-family homes, when you add up all of the single-family homes that are available in Dade and Broward County, every price point, whether it's a $300,000 house or a $50 million house. As of April 30th, there were more or less 13,000. That number has dropped, excuse me, I gotta use my cheaters, but it's dropped to about 11,500 in 60 days. And what's really interesting is, and I don't want to bore you with too many numbers, but in the last 3 years, Dade and Broward have been absorbing around 2,600 houses a month in MLS. That's how many sales we've been doing. And this year, we've been doing 3,000 a month. We'll get into who's buying those in a minute. But the condo, and by the way, that's a total seller's market. Good luck. Any of you who are selling houses, you know perfectly well that the houses are selling, in most cases, at list, and now we're starting to bid it up. Condos, not so much. Condos is where you see a little more inventory, and you're over the 10%. You are. And by the way, 5 to 10%, when you're in that range, that's what we would call equilibrium. And don't get used to that concept because you're hardly ever in equilibrium. I don't know why that is, but for some reason we either go from the seller's market to a buyer's market, from a buyer's market to a seller's market. I'm from New Jersey. We never really have spring. We go from winter to summer. It's like that in MLS too. You hardly ever are in the 5 to 10% range. Condos right now in 2019, yes, it's a buyer's market. But the canary in the coal mine is telling us that's not going to last very long, just based on the actual sales. Now, my opinion, what we do is we gather the facts and we share the facts with all of you. So here's another one. On April 30th, between Dade and Broward County, all price points, 21,000 condos were in MLS. Today, that number dropped by 500, 20,500. That doesn't mean we only sold 500 houses. That means you probably sold about 2,000 houses or maybe more, and more houses went into MLS. But here's the thing. Actually, the numbers were bigger than that. But here's the interesting monthly barometer. In the last 3 years, 16, 17, and 18, Dade and Broward were selling only 2,000 houses, condos rather, a month. This year it jumped to 2,400. MLS is the barometer that's telling us that the inventory that's in MLS right now represents less than 1 year with condos, less than 6 months with single-family homes. Now there will be more condos added to MLS, of course, and there's going to be more single-family homes added to MLS, but watch what happens with the pricing. Absorption is accelerating with MLS. We're going to be posting some of these numbers on our website in July because we're kind of calling this the end of Q2. But I find it fascinating. I think the reason for that is there's less choice available now with developer inventory. Population and demand continues, so people have no choice but to go fishing in MLS. And the numbers are saying that's exactly what's going on.
So let's go right into population, because and we have here about where's the demand coming from, but it really feeds into the next question. In the Miami report, we talk about the U.S. Census projection is that Florida is going to grow from 21 million to 29 million people in the next 21 years alone. So by 2040, Florida is going to grow in population by 40%.
Yes,
that's monstrous. How does that compare to the last year's population growth of 902 people a day?
The U.S. Census basically did the math for us. U.S. Census is saying that in the next 21 years, Florida will grow by around 1,000 people a day for the next 21 years. Now, put it in perspective, Texas is the fastest growing state in the country. No state income tax. They grew last year by around 1,100 a day. Florida was number 2 at 902 per day. Number 3 was California, which is a really fascinating number because 5 years ago, California was by far the fastest growing state in the U.S. They grew by like 1,200 a day, and I think Texas was 1,000, and Florida was between 800 and 900. Last year, California's daily population dropped to 350 people a day. Now, let me explain what all that means. It's really simple. The way the U.S. Census measures this, it's births, and then they subtract deaths. Sorry, it happens. People moving into a state, and then they subtract people moving out of a state. And that gives you X, and X is your daily population growth. That's it. It's not that hard. So what does it say about Texas? There's a lot of people moving in, not that many people moving out. Births and deaths are about the same as it's always been. The same stat is true about Florida. There's a lot of people moving in, not that many people moving out. In California, there's not that many people moving in anymore, and there's a lot of people moving out. A lot of that has to do with the income taxes in California because it's unbelievably expensive. But I will tell you, and I can't be the only one selling people from Los Angeles this year. That is ISG. There's no way we're the only ones. We've sold a couple of families at Brickell City Center. One of them I asked, So this is a second home? You like Miami that much? No, we're moving here. Oh, wow, because I love LA. I love Southern California. I love everything about California. What is it about Miami that you like so much? Look, we like Miami because of the weather, but it's not that we don't love California. The taxes are high. And forgive me for telling the story, but this is exactly what they told me. Did you see Malibu on fire last summer? Yes. Did you see Brentwood, California on fire the previous summer? Yes. It's getting very hot in California. They call them the Santa Ana winds that blow off the mountains, and they're rather ferocious, and the infrastructure, the fire department's having a hard time containing it. Long story short, these folks had it. I don't know if it's taxes or Mother Nature that's driving people out of California. California. We're talking about one of the largest economies in the world. If it was a country, one of the largest economies in the world. And they're moving. Most of them are moving to Arizona. A lot of them are moving to Nevada. Some are moving to Texas. But I imagine they're going 3,000 miles across the country and they're coming to South Florida.
I just keep thinking about traffic increasing by 40%.
Well, that's kind of the bummer. You know, a lot of you don't follow these numbers like we do at ISG, because that's where we get really into the demand. And by the way, that 902, it's worth mentioning, because right down there is that beautiful Porsche tower, and Casa Armani is getting built right next door to where I live. I live in Ocean 2. And I promise you, probably 75% of those sales are people that don't live here permanently. They're second homes. And in the 902 are no second home buyers.
Those are the permanent.
Those are people that call Florida the permanent home. And I don't know what percent of your sales are vacation homes. Ours is around 50%. So imagine that's on top of this 902, which is kind of a difficult number to quantify for everybody, but it speaks to the demand and the popularity of this place we work in called Miami.
So there was a state you really didn't talk about, and I don't think you did it on purpose. I think because we did go over this prior, but you didn't talk about New York, and New York's losing a lot of people. So what do you attribute the loss of population to New York, and what does that mean for potential buyers here in South Florida?
You know, it's a good question. Here's a sobering stat. About maybe when we first even published the first Miami report, the fastest growing state in the country was it was California, then Texas, then I think New York, and then Florida. It's New York. Come on, it's the capital of the world for as far as most people are concerned. Last year, New York was 50 out of 50 states. It was the slowest growing state by population in 2018. And in fact, it was in negative territory. It was minus 150. They absolutely expect this year that number will easily double. It's taxes mostly. A little funny human interest story for me, I guess. About 12, 15 years ago, Donald Trump hired ISG to sell a property in Panama called Trump Ocean Club. And I know that Trump is a buddy of Mr. Gildeser. This is not meant to be a political statement. Actually, quite the contrary. When he got elected president, I don't know about you all, but I thought, isn't this great for us? We finally have a former real estate developer in the White House, in the Oval Office. This has got to be great for us. Except I didn't really see anything happen, anything that really benefited our company, ISG, from a selfish perspective, until he passed that Tax Reform Act in December of 15. And it took away the advantages of state and local taxes in certain states. They call it SALT. That's an acronym.
So let me pause you there, because I went over this. How many of you know exactly what he talks about with the tax disadvantage now? Explain to them what changed.
Basically, if you live in New York or New Jersey, you're no longer allowed to deduct state and local taxes for federal income tax purposes. So in the old days, you got that as a nice deduction. And state and local taxes in New Jersey and New York are kind of heavy.
Yeah.
Massachusetts as well, Illinois as well. You can't do that anymore. So now you're paying state and local taxes. You can't deduct it for federal tax purposes. So you're probably, if you're living up there and you were making, say, $1 million a year, in the old days, you probably got away with paying $250,000 or $300,000 to Uncle Sam. That number is close to $500,000 now. So it's a significant difference.
So what does that mean for buyers down here?
Florida's no state income tax. If you can find a way to declare Florida your permanent home, whether you live here permanently like we do, or you live here 6 months and a day, and believe me, you don't have to explain that strategy to people in New York or New Jersey. They've invented the strategy. You just have to show them your property. They're coming. And Alex, as you know, Mike Ambrosio is president of ISG. He's a former CPA. He told us a short while ago, You ain't seen nothing yet. October 15th is the day that most wealthy people that's their deadline for income tax extension. That's when that's actually when they're expecting big refunds as they have in the past. And up north, they're not getting refunds. They're gonna find out they may even have to write another check. So two things are gonna happen on October 15th this year. One, they have to face the bill. And two, the thermometer starts to drop. And I promise you, Florida is going to be the talk at the kitchen table in New Jersey, in New York, in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, frankly, the entire Northeast. So I expect this coming season, where we are all going to see a huge pop of interest from the Northeast.
So get your phones ready and your email blasts ready to hit these buyers up in October.
Yeah.
So I have a question for the audience. How many of you like getting paid a 6% commission? Raise your hand. 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%. We all love that, right? Yes. We'd much prefer it over 3% commissions, 2.5% commissions, 2% commissions, right? All right, so this is the one question you definitely want to pay attention to. I think my favorite out of this entire thing. I keep hearing, because I'm in through osmosis, I'm with ISG a lot, hearing what's going on. And I've been hearing you say a lot that the new development life cycle is no longer the same. It's a new ball game.
Right.
We're no longer talking about 3-4 years. We're talking about 7 years, 6 years, 8 years, 9 years now in some cases. And why is that important to them when it comes to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% commission?
Okay. Around 30 years ago, I moved here from New Jersey, and I remember a high-rise building that we got hired to sell was considered 20, 25, maybe 30 stories. And you can only put so many units in a 20 to 30-story building. So it would typically take us 1 year to reach the pre-sale target, which is more or less you have to sell about half of the units in the building before the developer can close on a construction loan. You know, groundbreaking, corks off champagne bottles, and we've all been to the groundbreaking parties. It usually took a year. And it only took 2 years to build those buildings, whether it was 20 or 30 stories. Let's look at Casa Armani. Gil Deser and George Perez broke ground Casa Armani 3 years ago. They're about maybe 2.5 years ago. Sebastian, forgive me if I'm off of that much. But it's going to take you 3 years from start to finish to build it. It took them nearly 2 years to reach the pre-sale requirement. That's going to be normal. So the life cycle, it takes 9 months to make a baby. It now takes 5 to 6 years to make a high-rise condominium because we're not building 20 or 30-story buildings anymore. That's a 65-story piece of sculpture on Sunny Isles Beach. Down at Brickell City Center, well, T4 Hollow just finished building Panorama on Brickell Avenue. It's 85 stories. Brickell City Center wants to build one BCC, 85 stories. Property Markets Group wants to build the Waldorf Astoria on 3rd and Biscayne in downtown Miami. It's 100 stories. That's as tall as the Empire State Building in New York. So yeah, Miami's changed. So I think I know where you're going with the commissions. Most developers don't pay commissions until there's a groundbreaking. So if it's going to take us, if Gil Deser wants to build another building, let's say he says, Craig, I want ISG to do it this time. If I go as fast as I can, it's going to take me 2 years. And more than likely, at groundbreaking, that's when you get paid your commissions. You're going to have to wait. I'm going to have to wait. The existing inventory from Coconut Grove up to Fort Lauderdale, particularly the stuff that's standing inventory or the stuff that's about to be finished, like a Casa Armani. There's two things going on right now, and it's a bit ironic when you consider that we're running out of supply. You kind of wonder why developers are so anxious to sell. I think I know why, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But nevertheless, they're offering incentives right now to move that inventory. So for the buyers, they're getting a better deal now than they could have gotten if they bought 2 or 3 years ago. And for we real estate brokers, we're putting 6% in our pocket now. Not having to wait 2 years for a groundbreaking, not having to wait 5 or 6 years for the building to get finished. So the opportunity, the win-win right now is not so much for the developers. The win-win right now is for we real estate brokers and your clients. Your big problem is convincing your clients that now is the time to buy because they read stuff that's old. They get cocktail party conversations and they hear there's so much inventory to sell. Well, part of the reason that we share this information gladly is to point out to you, no, there's not that much inventory to sell. And if the sales pace keeps up, be it resales or developer sales, this time next year, any new developer inventory, 2 million or less is going to be gone. And the resales will be replacing that demand because that's the only place people can shop. So for us real estate brokers and for your clients, I've always dreamed of having that beautiful condo in Miami. And honestly, we all know buying real estate, residential real estate, what is it, 75 or 80 80% emotion. This is the logic that pushes them over the edge to bust a move now. The emotion is up to you. They want a home in Miami because it's Miami. It's kind of become its own kind of brand. You got to steer your clients right now to the unsold developer inventory that is either under construction or recently finished, because that's the win-win.
So let's rename this, instead of supply shock, let's rename it commission shock.
Okay.
So there's 19, how many? 1,900?
Well,
let's go back.
1988 right now.
1,988 units left that pay 6% to 10% commission. Let's do the math. There are 65,000 realtors in Dade and Broward County alone. There is not a lot of opportunities left to get the big commission. So if you have a buyer, we have 6 to 10% reason why bring them to new development sales.
And your clients are going to see they can get a bit. Leads and driving to most of the on-site salespeople on all of these properties are really, really good. The Casa Armani people, I know them all very well. They know how to sell Casa Armani. Get your clients to Casa Armani. Let them pitch the value story that Desert and Related are offering right now. Your clients will be convinced it's a great opportunity to buy. If they wait, you might have the same opportunity in December, but you're not going to have that same view. People are taking advantage of it right now. And it's not just the domestic market. We've also seen a little bit of a return of some South America.
Especially South Americans and North Americans in Mexico. Mexico. You know, we have an international department inside ISG. And it's so funny. I some of our brokers from Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela, they're all in Mexico. They're all in Mexico, so that's where the buyers are right now. And why? Because of the new president that they elected last year. I say it all the time because it's the truth. That president is scaring money out of Mexico. He's a socialist. He's extending his heavy hand in a very leftist way, and those that can are getting their money out. And I think the Mexicans are actually feeling their own self-imposed urgency, because remember Venezuela about 10 years ago when the money was flowing out of Venezuela, and then one day Hugo Chavez said not anymore, and he put currency restrictions on the outflow of cash out of that country. Eventually, I don't think this year, but perhaps by next year, you're going to see those same restrictions imposed on Mexicans. And I'm learning this from talking to the Mexicans that are buying real estate from us. So there's genuine natural urgency that's been created as a result of that president. So you add Mexico to what we're seeing from the Northeast to 902 people a day, there's demand out there. And that's part of what I think you need to explain to your clients, because those that snooze will lose. If they continue to think that real estate is remaining flat, they are wrong. If they think that there's a lot of inventory for sale, that they might have been right 2 years ago. They might have been kind of right last year. They're dead wrong right now. And hopefully the information in the Miami report will convince them that now's the time to bust the move. So we have 2 questions left, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A for all of you. Now, Vero, how many of you know Veronica Gorson? Some of you?
Okay, there's
Veronica Gorson is the Chief Marketing Officer for ISG. Her and her department get bombarded with special requests out of the 80-plus pages that are in the Miami report. What are some of the pages that are getting the most demand, and why does it matter to them?
Well, this is one of the big ones. We all know that the U.S. dollar, has slowed down demand for South Americans. South Americans love Miami. It's like selling a Disney ticket to an 8th grader. It's not hard to sell Miami to a South American. Not at all. But people with money have money because they're very careful managing their money. And it's impossible, nearly impossible right now to convince a Brazilian with the dollar trading, with the real trading at 4-to-1 against the U.S. dollar to buy Casa Armani right now. It's a very expensive asset. So it's slowed down the buyer demand. How has that affected the other side of the coin, which would be the real estate developers? Well, Veronica and her team put this little graph to show you. When you get your mitts on this, just look at it. It's rather self-explanatory. This talks about the cycle that we're now coming to an end with. It began in 2012. And it shows how many condos broke ground in 2012, 2013, 2014. Well, look what happened these last couple of years. Last year, from Coconut Grove to Fort Lauderdale, 4 condos broke ground. 4. Folks, that's 0. That's nothing. This year, probably another 4, and that's it. And from all the research we've done, there's like 0 scheduled for 2020. Now go back to our earlier conversation. If it takes 5 to 6 years from start to finish a building and hand someone the keys to their new apartment, the supply shock, or I should say the high U.S. dollar has affected developers because they can't get out of the ground. Why can't they get out of the ground? People like me from the Northeast, we will buy from you when you're under construction. We will buy from you when you're finished. We're not real fans of pre-construction. South Americans love pre-construction. You're getting in on price level 1. You get to move the money out every single month. It's a beautiful thing for the Latins, but they're not going to do it when the dollar's high. So consequently, developers haven't been able to break ground because the financial model that every developer has to respect is they have to sell 50 to 60% of all of their units before they can convince a construction lender to close on a construction loan. If the South American market is the natural market to fuel the pre-construction sales, and they're not buying at the moment because, and only because of the high dollar, well, there's nothing in the pipeline for new supply at the moment. This has become one of the more popular slides that I've seen brokers use with some success to point to the supply shock, to the depth of the supply shock. Folks, there's nothing in the pipeline right now. There's nothing. And I've been living here for 30 years, and I have enjoyed this beautiful life cycle of condominium development since I started ISG. There's always been a certain amount of projects that were in pre-construction, a certain amount of projects that were under construction, a certain amount of projects recently delivered, and the life cycle was just beautifully happening all the time. All of a sudden it came to a screeching halt. There's nothing. When was the last time there was a significant there wasn't a groundbreaking here? In Sunny Isles, I think it was the Estates of Acalina. One in the last couple of years. In the last couple of years. In Brickell, in the last 2 years, 0. Downtown Miami, they're going to have the hotel pad this year. That's the first one since Paramount. Paramount broke ground 3 years ago. You getting the point? There's nothing in the pipeline. So if demand for Miami, South Florida, Florida in general continues, and people a lot smarter than me are telling me there's no way you can even stop it. A year from now, I'll quote George Perez from Related, who said to me when I walked him through the Miami report a few months ago, he said in about a year, what we know, they'll know. And what he meant by that was, what we know that's us. We're the real estate professionals that follow these trends and study this information. Your clients, the general public, they don't know. They're still stuck in 2017 and 2018 data. But a year from now, they're going to figure it out. When they contact a local broker and ask them to start showing them stuff around, they're going to start realizing there's not much out there for sale. So 1 year from now, what we know, they'll know. The successful brokers in 2019 are getting those people to understand it right now. So this has become the most useful tool to make that right.
All right, last question. We're in Sunny Isles.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to show them a couple more pages?
No, just one. This is one of my favorites. I forgot where it is.
How many of you have a copy of the Miami report, either digital or in print?
Please get it, use it. I'm telling you, it's working. It's working.
So we have some in the front. And Beryl, what's the website if they want to get it? ISGMiamiReport.com. Go there, put in your email, and you'll get a digital version of the Miami report.
Just one last one. Page 60 is one of my personal favorites, and it's been kind of popular. If the state of Florida was a country, we are the 17th most important economy in the world right now. We're a $1 trillion economy. Now that by itself sounds kind of interesting. But you know how earlier this year Instagram did that 10-year thing? What we looked like 10 years ago and what we look like today? 10 years ago, Florida was the 52nd most important economy in the world, if Florida was a country. So in 10 years, we went from 52 to number 17. What will we look like 10 years from now with the population boom that is undoubtedly going to continue? I don't know. But it points not just to real estate, it kind of points to the depth and breadth of what Florida represents to a lot of folks. So that's another one.
What I love about what you just said is you have Instagram.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, well, my daughter.
What's your Instagram handle, Craig?
This big surprise, Craig Studnicky.
At Craig Studnicky. If you want to follow Craig, follow his family. Craig, last question. We're going to open it up to everybody. We're in beautiful Sunny Isles here at the Sales Center for Armani Casa. Again, thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Gil. And you have Muse up the street, which is an equally stunning project. What are your projections for these condos selling out here at Sunny Isles?
It's kind of based on price point. In Sunny Isles, I think that anything that's say $3 million and less, I like your chances of selling out by the end of next year. A property like Turnberry Ocean Club, where your average price is close to $5 million, it's going to take time. It's expensive. So I see that selling out closer to in 2022. Nothing wrong with the development; it's spectacular. But once you get over $3 million, that's real money, and absorption naturally slows down. I think the same is even true, Alex, for some properties like in Edgewater in downtown Miami. You know, properties like Elysee, Missoni, spectacular buildings, but they're expensive. They're going to take a little while to burn off. Aston Martin as well. But anything that's $2.5 million and less may sound like a bold prediction, but by the end of 2020, it's done.
All right, so let's open it up. I think we've talked enough. Craig, we had 9. You've sweated enough for sure.
God.
So,
Monica asked me to wear a suit and tie, so I did. It's really warm up here.
Yeah, I had to wear a suit and tie too. I'm a fan of Lululemon. All right, who's got questions for Craig? Wow, we have 100-something people here, no questions.
Actually, we told them 45 minutes. It's 40 minutes.
I don't know how many. How long have we read?
We've done exactly 40 minutes. Right. One question.
All right, go ahead.
That's more you.
So the question is, what do we think about Zillow, Redfin, Realty.com, and all that good stuff? Albert's probably better suited to answer this question back there. I don't think they're a threat. I think at the end of the day, technology in our business, everybody's looking at technology as a disruptor. I don't think it's a disruptor. I think it's just going to help us do additional business. Even we had lunch the other day with the president or the CEO of NAR. Even the National Association of Realtors is embracing technology. At the end, this business is face-to-face, belly-to-belly pump. So as long as you continue to do that, work the people that you know, you'll be okay.
That's a little mini shout out to you.
All right, so the question is, how do you handle buyers who say prices are going to keep dropping in lieu of a recession coming up in the next year to 2 years?
Well, right now you are dealing with the strongest U.S. economy ever. And I've been hearing about this negative yield curve because of the bond market for the last 2 years, and we're defying all of those old rules right now. So I don't know. I really go right back to the supply of condos and the demand. I think Florida's not immune to economic recessions for sure. But the dynamics attached to the demand side of this compared to the constraint on supply, I think kind of rebuts that argument better than ever. And look, I'm not an economist, but did you expect mortgage rates to drop earlier this year? Because I did not, and they have. Now, that's all in reaction to bond markets, but no, they've been threatening that the U.S. was going to have a cooled-off economy, and the stock market was overheated 2 years ago. And meanwhile, we continue to see new highs. So I listen. What I tell those folks is, you're not buying or interested in buying a piece of real estate in Miami because you're worried about the recession. You want to be in Florida. You want to be in Florida. So I'm going to talk to you like I've known you all my life. Snap out of it. If you want to be in Florida, buy a piece of property while you can. Don't get too caught up with all these economic indicators that are as wrong as meteorologists predicting weather. That's my answer.
All right.
Thank you.
Other questions for Craig?
Oh, Mr. Bill.
All right, here we go. It's working. It's working?
It's working.
It's working. Oh, here we go. There we go. This is the best cell phone signal here. Okay, now it's working.
Yeah, don't move.
So for those of you who don't know,
Can you hear me now?
my real estate career started with this gentleman right there.
That's right.
Working for ISG. I was 22 years old, dumb, and full of ambition. And he hired us. He hired me rather to work at Hidden Bay. So he was the one who gave me a start. My question to you though, you gave a phenomenal report. I've been following your report since you guys started doing it in the beginning. We've been hanging our hats on it because we see that what it is the actual truth. And said we see the value as developers to give you the information in order to be able to come up with the proper amount of information to do these kind of reports. Because just by taking a few of the projects that you sell without everybody else donating that stuff will not really work properly.
Right.
Question.
Why is it that the press is not reporting as better still bothers to
I think it's. Do you hear that question?
The question is, why does the press keep going to unqualified people and not to qualified people like the ISG by importing Craig?
Yeah. Oh, Peter Zalewski's here. God bless him.
No, he's not here. He's not allowed here.
Peter Zalewski is what made the Miami Report famous, so I love Peter Zalewski. And in fact, you know why, Gil? Because it's that old cliche, if it bleeds, it leads. The press loves to talk about bad news, even whether it's true or not. They would rather talk about somebody getting divorced than somebody getting married. They would rather talk about, you know, a coming real estate recession than stuff like this and the robust, you know, demand side that we're seeing in South Florida, because that's just how the press are. I will tell you, Veronica and I were very fortunate at this particular time. The Real Deal and the South Florida Business Journal were really kind. They really did some nice press on this for a while. I mean, right after this one came out. But I think it's not just because of the Peter of the past. There are also some brokers, and I'd rather not mention this one fellow's name, who was quoted in the Real Deal suggesting that there were 5 years of inventory right here in Sunny Isles Beach. And I know that broker. And I know why he says that, Gil. He says it because he's trying to convince his sellers to lower their prices. And when he predicts gloom and doom, he scares a lot of people that he has listings with to lower their prices so they can move this stuff quickly. That's his whole agenda. But the press, they love to write about bad stuff. And that stuff gets, and you know what stinks about that? Because you got a good point. When that stuff comes out, every one of you read it because it goes viral. And every one of your clients read it because it goes viral. And for some of us, we don't even want to get out of bed in the morning because what's the point? And then your buyers come back and said, see, I saw it in the Real Deal. See, I'm going to wait. They like to publish bad news no matter what it is. No matter what it is. So you can't stop that, Gil. You're never going to be able to. What we can do is just try to defrag all that bad gossip and that BS out there, pardon my French, and give you the real facts that you can really use to close some deals.
Well, you know what's great about that? Most people here were at the event at Brickell City Center, and yet here we are covering the Miami Report again, and kudos to you guys because you're only as good as what you know. And by hearing this over and over again gives you the information to rebuttal what the bad press is out there. So good job, guys.
And I promise you, Veronica, Alex, and I, we update this every quarter, and it's always going to be online because the stuff that was printed on April 30th, we just walked you through it, to some extent it no longer applies. There's less inventory today than there was on April 30th. There will be less inventory on August 30th than there is today. Stay tuned. We'll continue to update it. And hopefully the updates will help you close those deals of folks that really, really want to buy because they really want to live here and breathe this magnificent air and feel this, have this kind of a lifestyle. It's like nothing else on the planet. They just want to make a good buy. And hopefully this is what gets them over the edge.
Sir, what's your question?
Oh, welcome.
Can't hear it.
We'll repeat the question now. The question is, how do we as realtors and developers get involved with government to get the infrastructure that's built to support this 902 people a day? Well, actually, hold on. So let's clarify this for me.
I can help with that, by the way.
I wish you would.
But hold on, before you answer. There's 902 people a day moving to Florida. What about South Florida?
South Florida gets 45, almost half of that. Miami-Dade alone gets 25%. So call it 200 people a day. That's how Miami-Dade grows every single day. Sir, your question is spot on. I'm going to let Gil Dezer, a developer and a landowner that he thinks about that, frankly, more than you do. And frankly, we all should. But Gil, if you would.
It's actually not me who's thinking about it. The people who we've elected in the cities are the ones who are thinking about it. With respect to Sunny Isles, is a perfect example. The Sunny Isles Island. This is a barrier island. So when you say infrastructure and people moving here and how many people can be absorbed, there's what's called a comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is it's something that the engineers have figured out how many people this barrier island can hold with respect to hurricane evacuation, with respect to water coming in, water consumption, sewage. If you ever think where all that sewage might go to. And so they have a number, and based on that, then they say, okay, well, here's the land masses we have, and they divide up density based on those land masses. So they give a little density to the ocean, they give a little bit less to the intracoastal, but they come up with a master plan and a master zoning that says Sunny Isles can have 30,000 units. Today we have 22,000 units. We have 8,000 to go. Here's where the 8,000 can go. So as far as infrastructure goes, it's theoretically there. We have traffic because we have traffic. I mean, traffic is everywhere in the world, and until we get to the flying cars, we're gonna have traffic. These things are well thought of, and guys like us, when we go build a building, we have to go request our rights to use those units because the city has that internal pool. And so it's and there's a lot of complication behind it. There's zoning attorneys who make a living out of this whole thing. So, but it's a lot more than just what's going to happen when they move here. They're not all moving to Sunny Isles, unfortunately. They should. But we are every developer, and every time we build a building, we pay impact fees towards these things. We do lift stations, we do all kinds of things for the water and sewer, and that's where we can accommodate the amount of people that we're selling to. Here's another thing, talking about traffic though, getting a little off subject, because people do complain about traffic, and what they need to understand was when there was this little motel right here next to us, that motel was being rented out, to a transient guest, a new person every 3 to 6 days. Those people are here on vacation. They're moving in and out of the hotel room, maybe to the beach sometimes, but they're also going shopping, they're going to the supermarket, they're going here, there, and there. The amount of traffic generated from a hotel is substantially more traffic than what is generated from these condominiums that are second homeowners. And so by us erasing these hotels and adding condominiums, we're actually alleviating the traffic problem that you see around at least in this area. One of the studies that have been done in Sunny Isles Beach specifically, Collins Avenue, 78% of the traffic in Collins Avenue is transient. There's people going from north to south. There's not people living here. So adding more traffic to this is not, as far as infrastructure and everything, adding more units to this will not create a traffic problem.
Very good answer. Very good answer.
Technical answer.
And by the way, you're right. The future politicians of South Florida, that's one of the things they got to wrap their heads around. Bright line was one small step for man, but we've got to start figuring out how we're going to move the masses, because there's no stopping people coming to South Florida. Everybody comes here with a car. Everybody. We got to figure that part out. Sometimes two. If you're Gil Desert, 75.
and he'll be the first to have a flying car.
More.
Right? How many of you have been on Brightline, by the way?
Brightline.
Brightline. Brightline is amazing.
The Virgin train now, right?
Virgin train.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's comfortable. It's so nice. You can get from Miami to Fort Lauderdale before you can finish your cappuccino. It's quick. And you don't have to worry about being in a godforsaken parking lot that we call 95 during rush hour. It's lovely. Especially the trip from Fort Lauderdale to West Palm. It's sweet. And there's this thing that today they call Uber. Say when you land, wherever you're going to land, they're always buzzing around like fireflies. They pick you up. It's really nice to live in South Florida tonight. The train makes a big difference.
Other questions?
You guys did a great job. Oh, one more question? Go ahead.
Oh, goodness. Yes.
Statistically, it goes up and it goes down, so therefore, we move forward to some downturn.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, it'll be 1 year or 2 years, or 3, who knows, but at some point it'll be down. May I ask you, if it happened tomorrow, and I'm not saying it is, this is for everybody for the future so many years, what would you, what advice would you give so that we can sustain the market, so we can strengthen it rather than capitulate and collapse?
So if
what are the factors that would strengthen us through any downturn whenever it occurs?
I'm going to quote Kieran Bowers. He's the CEO of Swire Properties that developed Brooklyn City Center. He and I had this conversation about 6 months ago. And he was talking about the negative yield curve and why the United States is poised to slip into a recession. The stock market should start to correct. And he said that would be really good for you, news for you, though, Craig, because if that were to happen, the U.S. dollar would start to devalue. And if I were you, I would call all of those contacts you have in South America, because overnight they would have buying power, and they would finally be able to buy that home in South Florida that they have not been buying for the last 3 or 4 years because of the stubbornly high dollar. Welcome to Miami. This is a city that, in many ways, we are not recession-proof. Of course not. But from a real estate perspective, the demand curve is literally north, east, west, and south. It's all over the world. And as soon as that dollar devalues a little bit for one reason or another, particularly you're concerned, expect South America, particularly Brazil, to come back in some significant numbers, which would mean, yes, the domestic market would slow down, but South America would pick back up. That's the beauty, to some extent, for all of us, for living here in Miami.
In Miami, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's Kieran Bowers. I'm just quoting him. He's a lot smarter than
If
me.
I may add to it, I think one thing people really need to understand, you know, we talk about markets as if real estate, wait, in the back, shh. We talk about markets as if real estate is a stock market, and it's not. You know, this is a long-term game. You know, I started, like I said, with him 20 years ago, and we built 10 buildings, but it all didn't happen in 5 minutes. You know, it took a lot of time on each one, and we were doing it simultaneously. So the answer, what I've learned, and I don't know who I learned this from, so I can't quote anybody, but I can quote Choosing if you want. But what I learned is there's no such thing as distressed properties, there's distressed sellers. So what happens in reality is, you know, if you're not getting your price, just wait. Unless you absolutely need to sell. And then when you need to sell, of course, it's a different price. And if you need to buy, then just hang out and wait for that guy who needs to sell. You know, if you're one of those bottom feeder buyers. But at the same time, it's not about, the real estate's not going to be going up, it's not going to be going down. It's not about how your neighbor feels. It's not necessarily about how you feel. It's where the market goes. And today it might be great, tomorrow it might not be good. You got to time your sales of when you decide to sell your apartment when it's a seller's market, not a buyer's market. Unless you're strapped and you need the cash, and that's what creates buyer's markets.
That's brilliant. It didn't come from me, though, but that was brilliant.
Well, guys, I want to say thank you very much for coming.
Thank you,
To
Gil.
me, it's a big honor to have Craig over here. Alex, we just met recently. We're become good friends. But, I mean, to me, it's a huge honor because, you know, he was my teacher. And to have him come here and teach everybody here and explain a little bit about what he knows, and just a half an hour with Craig is a wealth of information. And so, again, thank you so much for doing this. And we appreciate you guys coming. Hopefully we'll do it again.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
You guys.
Now we get to pull off.